Today I'm here with Kerry Baker. How you doing, Kerry?
Good, Carol. How you doing?
I am great. Kerry just was telling us about his latest toy. What's that again? What did you
What?
get?
What's that?
The latest toy that you got?
Oh, 338 Lapua Magnum build. Been working on for about 4 years. So, um, I wouldn't show you, but it would fill the screen. It's pretty big.
Some of you may have pools, other people have tennis courts. He has a shooting range. So Kerry's very special. You gonna let me come up there and shoot sometime?
Yeah,
All right. All right.
the shooting range in progress. But
All right. Okay. There, there is something, you know how in the middle of our talk, we always want to talk to you about something that we are working on or think that will help you. So we're going to talk about that about halfway through the show. But right now, we're going to start with the questions. And Kerry, you get the first one. Nate, I'm 40% now for loss of use of foot, 0% skeletal, zero skin, zero scars for 37 years. I've never filed for an increase, but now I have severe pain in my knee and my skin and scars are very painful. Do you think it's possible to get an increase from the 0% scars and skin? Lots of arthritis in my knee. What are the possibilities of an increase? Gary, how would you handle this?
well, the short answer is yes. You can get an increase in some of that stuff. If you've had the loss of use for 37 years, you're protected at that rate. You've got no chance of them reducing that down. So that's good. That you wouldn't get an increase in the loss of use per se. Say if the loss of use is of the foot, but now you've got a knee problem on top of it, right? Then you could, if unless the loss of use is from the knee, I'm assuming it's probably not. Then yeah, you could file for the knee and potentially get a new service connection there. Same thing for the scars. If they're 0%, typically scars, they weren't painful at one point.
Carrie, I hate
Yeah.
to bother you, but it looked like we were muted, so you can come back and start with the beginning. Okay.
Oh,
So
okay.
yes, you think you can get an increase. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
everybody.
No, no, that's all right. So the short answer is yes, you can get an increase. If the knee is not service connected, I'm assuming it's not. If I would think that's the lost use of the foot, maybe. And if your knee is something additional that's happened since the loss of use, you can get a rating for the knee separately from the loss of use. Same thing for the scars. You can get a higher rating, obviously, since it's already service connected. What I was saying earlier is typically scars don't get worse, but it depends. If it's an amputation and they have to go redo things, scar certainly you can develop a painful neuroma or something like that, or if something about them has changed over time. But if they're painful, all right, if they're tender or painful, then you should be able to get at least a 10% rating for the scars. You may not get one for each and every scar, depending on how many there are in the area that they're located in. But if they're 0% and they're painful, you can get an increased rating. Same thing for the skin condition. If it's gotten worse, you can get an increased rating for that. But I keep something in mind though. There's a thing called the amputation rule, right? And that amputation rule basically says you cannot be rated for an extremity higher than if the extremity were amputated, right? Which makes sense, I think. However, there's multiple levels of potential amputation, and therefore there are multiple levels of ratings there. So if your knee problem is in the same leg as the leg that's got loss of use of the foot, all right, you could run up against the amputation rule, but it would go like this: an amputation below the knee is 40%. So that's the amputation rule, unless there's a tender and painful scar on the stump, like a painful neuroma, you can still get 10% for that painful scar, even though you might be hitting the amputation rule. If it's amputated at right above the knee, it's 60%. Okay. And then it goes all the way up to the right next to the hip, and then just articulated at the hip, which would be 90% if you can't wear a prosthesis. So those are the various, I don't mean to get too much in the weeds, but those are the various amputation rule rates. Because your knee, all right, it would be rated all, anywhere from 0 to 30, 40%, it would hit the amputation rule above the knee. So even though you got 40% for the leg for the loss of use of the foot, you got a knee problem on top of that, you could still go up higher without exceeding the amputation rule for that leg. So that's just something important to know. If somebody at the VA or a VSO tries to tell you now you can't get a higher rating, that's not true. They're misapplying the amputation rule. But the skin condition and the scars, yeah, absolutely. Those at 0%, those can, the only place they can go is up or stay at 0.
Right. So remember, I go up. So say you have a foot that's going to throw a foot that's service connected and you're disabled because of that. That's going to throw your gait off. It's going to affect your knees. It's going to affect your back. It's going to affect your hips. So if you have a problem with any of those things, you need to file for service connection for those secondary to the loss of use of foot. The other thing I would ask is, do you have any depression, anger, panic due to this pain and this loss of foot that you have? You should file for that. And then the third thing is, you mentioned skeletal. I'm not really sure what that means. I don't know why skeletal would be 0, but I'm not sure exactly what that covers. So remember, you have a lot of things you can do. And just to say, since you've had this for 37 years, you are protected. That means they can't take the service connection away and they can't take the rating away. So you have nothing to lose. So I would definitely go for it.
One real quick thing on that, and it doesn't sound like the question involves this, but it's still good to know you've got loss of use of one foot. Okay. Let's say you've got major problems with the other foot, all right, through non-service connected reasons, be it anything. You get in a car wreck, they have to amputate your other foot, all right? Or you're always relying on that foot, and then it eventually gets arthritic to the point where you can't walk on it, and VA denies service connection. But you've got loss of use of, say you got loss of use of both feet. Well, one is service connected, one is not. All right, that's where a regulation called 38 CFR 3.383 comes into play. It's paired extremities and organs. And it basically says if you've got a service connected loss of use of one foot or hand or kidney or numerous other things, and a non-service connected loss of use of the other, they have to compensate you as if both are service connected. All right, which changes the picture completely once you start getting into more than one extremity having loss of use. So just something to keep in mind.
Right. Thanks, Kerry. Can a lawyer help a surviving spouse with filing initial DIC and death benefits, or must the spouse do it alone or with a VSO? What would you tell her?
There's a lot of firms that won't take a case unless it's already been denied. But there's no rule against it. Absolutely, it's up to the firm really. If you have a firm that you want to use and they're willing to take the case and file the claim, there's nothing wrong with that. They may tell you to go file the claim, and if you get denied, then contact them. Which I can see both sides of the coin, I guess, depending on the case. You certainly don't want to pay for representation that if you can win the claim, you just file it and win the claim. It might be easier that way, but there's, as far as whether you can or can't, sure, they can. It's up to the firm and up to the potential client. Would you agree with that, Carol?
Well, I agree with you, and it's just up to them. But one thing that we do is if we're representing the veteran and he dies, we always file the DIC claim for the widow if we think there's a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And we do not charge if they win on the first opportunity, the first go round. But other than that, I'm like with Kerry, if you think this is a slam dunk, then go to a VSO. Why pay for it if you feel that you're entitled to? It's really up to you and the firm that you're trying to go with.
Yeah, I mean, we take cases where there's not been a claim filed yet.
Yes.
We do it on a limited basis. I might do it probably more than anybody else, but that's because I'm usually in those particular claims. I'm fairly certain VA is going to deny the benefit. They're usually very difficult cases to win, so I'd rather just get my foot in the door early and start the process correctly. But it doesn't have to be that way by no means. So.
No. One of three, one of two or three. The veteran wins 100% permanent total on presumptive August 10th, 2023, and dies 3 years later from a non-service connected event, auto accident. Is the spouse eligible for DIC? And if yes, what CFR states so? Next question. Is there another one, Nate? Thank you for all the information. My wife and I really appreciate it. You're welcome. You want to go back to that again? So if the veteran wins 100% permanent total, but the effective date, I'm assuming, is August 10th, 2023, and dies 3 years later from a non-service connected event like an auto accident, is the spouse eligible?
It depends.
I knew you were going to say that. On what?
Well, I mean, it straight up how the question's asked, right? VA may very well deny DIC in that case. If they look at the whole thing and say, look, the death, the car accident was not caused by the service-connected condition in any shape, manner, or form. And the death is just truly, it's undebatable that it's not related to the service-connected condition. They're going to deny that claim. Unless that rating is from, and I doubt this is the case, but that rating is from the military service. In other words, you got out of service and you've been rated 100% permanent and total, say for, 5 years, it's not at the 10-year point, and something happens and that veteran dies, then the spouse can get DIC.
So in other words, if they've only been out of service 5 years. See,
right.
If they don't been out of service 3 years, then yes.
Right. So if they've been rated consecutively since discharge at 100%, those rules, there's a slight modification of the rules on something like that. Now, if you're 100% permanent and total August, I'm assuming this is a hypothetical question,
right,
since it's already 2023. Obviously, if you keep it for 10 years and then get hit by a car, you're okay, because once you're at 10 years, 100% permanent total, then the surviving spouse is going to get DIC automatically. It doesn't matter what the cause of death was. But otherwise, yeah, you want to try to show that the cause of death was somehow related to the service connection. A true car accident would be difficult, but I've seen them. It just depends on the facts of the case. And, if you can show that any part of that service connection contributed to that car accident, you've got a chance for it then.
The veteran had trouble being in a car. He panicked and he caused the accident or was part of the accident. That would be one way to do it. The other thing you can do is you have the option to try and go back and show he had been disabled for 10 years, right?
What's that?
What if he died 3 years later, and wouldn't they have the option to allege that he had in fact been entitled to PTSD for, I guess, 100% permanent total back 10 years?
You could,
if you felt you had the evidence.
Yeah, if you had a hook to go back that far and had the evidence and got the earlier effective date and all, then yes, you could. And even if they wouldn't pay the widow for the back pay for the accrued portion, it would still assist in the DIC claim. A good example of that is the veteran dies. He's 100% or not 100%. Say he's been 100% for 2 years, and he dies in a car accident. If the widow can show there's a CUE, all right, now this is rare, okay, but it's possible. I've done it several times. In that CUE, clear and unmistakable error, back say 10 years prior, would have resulted in the veteran being 100% permanent total. Then, even though the widow can't get that back pay, unless that claim was pending as an accrued benefit, she can still use it to establish DIC under 1318, which is the 10-year rule. So, when we say there's always specific things in certain cases, sometimes there are what you wouldn't normally think of.
Exactly.
That's why when it depends, sometimes it truly does depend. So.
Right. So on the face of it, no. But there's a lot of things that may make this a viable claim. That's not knowing all of the facts. What is he 100% permanent total for? I mean, we're just guessing at things that we would try if he was just say it was a mental claim and he was just in a wreck. So we need to know the exact facts. If it's just has nothing to do with his service connection, that'll be no. But there, you always want to. You do this for so many years. You see little ins and outs sometimes, and that's why we always hate to say adamantly no or yes, because we don't really know all of the ins and outs of your case. Hello, I had a higher level review on a denial where an error was found and then the VA closed my review. What step usually comes after this? Usually you should have gotten a decision, don't you think? So,
Yeah. I have seen, I'm speculating here. I've seen several cases, not so much, say, in the past few months, but certainly like last year,
right.
where, and earlier this year, where the HLR sent the case back on duty to assist era, and the end product that was supposed to be generated into the supplemental claim lane never happened.
Right.
And we had to contact the RO and say, look, this was done on a higher level review. It was sent back on duty to assist era, and there's now all of a sudden no claim pending. And they had to go back in there and reestablish that claim. That could be, if I had to guess, that's what I would guess is what happened here. If they haven't given you a decision and you look in there and there's just nothing pending, they will close the issue after the HLR, okay, because that's just how they work these AMA appeals. But it is supposed to generate a new end product to track the supplemental portion, the track the duty to assist era return. I keep calling it a supplemental claim. I know it's technically not. It's done by the supplemental claim lane, but it's back there on a duty to assist era from an HLR review. So you want to make sure they establish that end product. They were having problems with that. And I think it was a system issue, and I'm sure they've not caught them all.
I am sure too, because
Yeah,
I've seen
never.
that.
Yeah,
So in other words, you should have gotten a decision. If you didn't get a decision, you need to contact the VA and let them know. If you did get a decision and you want to appeal it, because there was a duty to assist, this is really a supplemental decision, even though you had filed a higher level review. So your answer to your question, if you actually got a decision, is now you can file a higher level review, or you can put new evidence in and file a supplemental claim, or you can go to the board. First claim adjudicated and 3 conditions were service connected. I filed a second claim for presumptive and secondary with all the medical evidence the VA has from the first claim. Should they be able to use all uploaded medical evidence from the first claim and not submit the same medical records from the first claim? I previously did not submit all conditions in the first claim. So yes, they should be able to use the same evidence. In other words, they should have all my medical records from the first claim to work on the adjudication of the second claim. Is this correct? Yes. If I developed, diagnosed, but not yet claimed, secondary sleep apnea, radiculopathy, and tension headaches within 1 year of my primary 90% combined rating decision of 70%, I don't know what the first, do you know, is that PTSD, 70%, lumbar 40, cervical tinnitus 10, and hearing loss? Am I eligible to file supplemental claim review based on disagreeing with their decisions, or would secondary conditions not qualify as worsening of my condition? I filed my second intent to file 3 months after my first primary condition rating decision, but I'm trying to obtain a decision granting secondary via supplemental review option in hopes to get retroactive benefits to my original intent date to file 2021. I am lost. Are you, Kerry?
I think I might. No, there's a lot of stuff there. All right, this is a heavy. It depends because I know you listed the issues and you've got secondary issues. First thing, if you know all the conditions, just I know this is hindsight, try to do it all in one claim.
Please.
Don't do two claims. You know, I got my main thing, and now I'm going to go for my secondary conditions, because that can easily be one claim that'll all go back to the original
Right.
effective date of the first claim. Now, if let's just say you got 20, 30, 40% for your back, right? And when they examined you, you had radiculopathy down both legs, and they didn't rate that,
Right.
right? And now you're filing a secondary claim for radiculopathy caused by your back condition. If it was in the record when they rated the lumbar spine, right? Yeah, you can file a secondary claim, and you might have to get them to rate it, but I would appeal it instead, because under 3.355, I think it's D2, that is an issue within the scope of the original claim.
Right.
Right, and they are supposed to address issues within the scope of the underlying or original claim when they address the original claim. Just like rating diabetes, and you've got peripheral neuropathy or any of the whole list of things diabetes can cause. If it's in the record, you should not have to go back and file a second claim for things that are within the scope. Now, there are other things that are probably not going to be within the scope. Let's say you file for PTSD, and you have a sleep apnea, and you think you want to file, you know, that's not going to be within the scope of a PTSD claim, because it's just not, it's not something that goes hand in hand, although you can usually get it service connected secondary to. That's why I would file both of those at once and not wait to come back later and file the sleep apnea claim. I might be going off your question there, but there was a lot to it, and I don't
No, I
remember.
think you covered it. And that's one of the things when you went up to see the new undersecretary you were complaining about. Because, like, I will have my clients service connected for diabetes, but even though there's plenty of evidence and claims in there about peripheral neuropathy and other things that are secondary to the diabetes, a lot of times, if this particular claim didn't have that in there and I filed a separate claim, they won't give them the peripheral neuropathy. So I
Yeah.
think what you said, Kerry, is we need to, it's really important to allege all of the problems initially. Don't wait and then piecemeal it. You're going to have a fight with the VA. You're going to have trouble getting the initial onset date that you want. That's just not a good way to do it. And I don't know why people do that.
Yeah. And if you do this, the follow-up claim, you know, say you do it on an HLR, you appeal it instead of filing a new claim for it, odds are they're going to come back with a request for application letter and reject it, saying that it was not addressed on the original claim, which it should have been, right? If there was a residual within the scope of the original claim, and then you end up fighting that, they'll just cancel that claim, and you won't know what's going on. And if you come back and file a brand new 526, then they don't take the effective date all the way back. Then they've kind of got you over the coals, saying, well, you filed a brand new claim, and that's true,
Right.
you did, but only because they're rejecting the appeal in the first place. I mean, these are complications that if you're out there doing it on your own and VA rejects it like this, it's difficult, right? It's
It is.
difficult for us to get them on track. So it's going to be very, very difficult.
Sherry, I've had to appeal a lot of these to the board. They're just not giving the correct onset date. So please don't put yourself in that situation. Claim everything when you first file a claim. Recently met with VA judge on an appeal. Seemed to go well. How does VA implement a ruling once made by the judge? Thanks for the good information all you provide. You're welcome. Kerry, what would you tell him?
Well, if you got anything at the Board of Veterans Appeals, they're gonna address that on. For example, if you got service connection for PTSD at the Board of Veterans Appeals, and they grant service connection, their decision is going to grant service connection, and that's it.
Right.
They're not going to assign the effective date most of the time. They're certainly not going to assign the rating, because those are not before the board. They look at the issue narrowly, because they're an appellate body, and they'll, all right, we're granting service connection. That then goes back to the regional office per se. It goes to usually the DROC, which operates like a regional office. It may not go back to the one at your home state, and it really doesn't matter these days. Um, but it goes back to the DROC or the regional office, whatever you want to call it. they will implement the board's decision and decide the effective date and decide the rating that you're going to get. Now, just because you want it, the board don't think VA is going to do the right thing when they go to decide the rating and effective date. They still might screw that up and lead you to appealing that all over again. So just know what your effective date should be. You know, be familiar with the ratings for the condition that you got. But once the regional office or DROC implements that decision, um, you can appeal things that weren't before the board. The effective date, not before the board in a service connection case. Right. The rating, not before the board. Right. So those are subject to new appeals if they get them wrong. But that's the general process. The board makes the decision, but they don't have the necessary tools to implement that decision and get the benefits paid out and all that. That has to be done at the local level because they have ties in their system to the Treasury Department, and they once they process the decision, it goes where it needs to go for the money to go to the right person. The
Right.
Board of Veterans Appeals they just don't have that capability. They're judges and lawyers that look at the case and decide yes, no, or maybe uh, remand.
And they can only decide, they can only review something that's been decided. And since the question was, if you're service connected, then they certainly haven't decided a rating or an effective date. And just to give you a heads up, I am seeing a lot of board grants for service connection, and the rating is 0% and the wrong effective date. So I'm seeing a lot of this come out, much more than I'd seen in the past year. I don't know what's going on, but it's a mess. So I'm
Well, and
just
that's the whole reason we met with the
right.
undersecretary of benefits a few weeks back.
And I think he said that the people that were giving these ratings were pretty much newbies, right? They weren't the more
They were not their senior decision review officers. They are, and they used to be,
right,
but now they are their regular first line supplemental claim raters that work at the DROC. And I mean, a lot of times it goes right, but man, when it goes wrong, it can go very wrong. And so don't assume that because the board granted it, that the regional office has done everything downstream of there correctly, because they might not have.
right. Be prepared to appeal.
Mhm.
60% asthma. My cardiologist says I have enlarged right ventricle due to sleep apnea. Is it worth claiming sleep apnea? Is it worth claiming? Uh, well, it seems to me, Kerry, that would give them the heart. If they get service connected for the sleep apnea, then they would be entitled to the enlarged right ventricle.
Right. You want to do that quickly. Yeah, that can help in a lot of ways. One, if you're asthmatic, you're more prone to getting sleep apnea. I don't care what the freaking VA examiners say. Uh, it's just a fact. You are. And you're going to have two respiratory. Let's say they service connect to sleep apnea. You're going to have the asthma and the respiratory. You won't get the 50% rating if you're on a CPAP machine for the asthma for the sleep apnea plus the 60 for the asthma. They're going to combine those two. Now you're going to have an argument that they should bump it up one level, and they might. I use that argument a lot. But let's just say it goes right into the 60% for asthma, and that rating doesn't change. Carol's absolutely right. You got the heart secondary to it. That's going to be 30% rating for an enlarged heart, and
Right,
that's if everything else is fine with the heart. Okay, but just the fact that it's enlarged, if it's service connected, that's an additional 30% rating you get in addition to the 60 for the asthma, even
right.
if the sleep apnea didn't change anything. So yeah, I would seek that.
And the sleep apnea, that can be 50%, but then if you need a BiPAP, you may be up to 80%. So
Mhm.
that could raise that as well. So you have several options depending on the facts of your case.
And it could be, secondary to the asthma. If you're oxygen starved, uh, I mean, that's what sleep apnea does. It just does it while you sleep. You're oxygen starved, and it's
Right,
more pressure and strain and everything on the heart. I wouldn't rely solely on the sleep apnea. I would bring in the asthma because bad respiratory problems can cause heart problems, pulmonary
Exactly.
hypertension, all, right heart failure. And those are right in the rating schedule. So I would use both of those.
Okay. Enlarged right ventricle and sleep apnea secondary to asthma. Good luck. 70% in mental health. The effective date is 2019. I worked briefly in 2020, but made less than 10,000 before having to leave my job for related reasons. I'm now filing for unemployability. I just found out about unemployability recently and have not worked since 2020. My Social Security earnings show this as well. When would my effective date be for back pay? 2019, 20, or 23? I've seen conflicting information.
It could be all. It could be
Yeah.
any of those. Yeah.
It could be any of those dates.
I mean, realistically, if you're filing your TDIU claim within a year of the rating that got you to within the range of TDIU, it should, if they follow the law correctly, go back to 2019. If your earnings were less than gainful, okay, and you might want to show them that. If you just tell them I was employed in 2019, then they're probably not going to give you TDIU for 2019, thinking you were employed. Okay, if you were employed below the poverty threshold, that's a different story. Um, and so I could easily see, depending on who raised the case, giving a
Exactly.
2019 or giving a 2020 based on that's the last time you worked, or giving a 2023 based on that's when you file the TDIU claim. And it's probably going to be the latter, but you can win the earlier effective date. And I say it's going to be the latter because that's just what we see, right, Carol?
What we see is they're going to give you the latest date.
Yeah, the date of the TDIU claim, even if that's
Right.
not accurate. We see that a lot.
Why does BVA approve unemployability yet defer back to the VA to establish an effective date? Because remember, they can only review what has already been decided. So there was no decision that you got unemployability, much less a decision as to what the date should be.
Yeah, think of going into federal court with an appeal for something and raising something brand new for the first time. The court's going to laugh at you and kick you out.
Right.
I mean, it's an appellate body inside the VA operates the same. It's a narrowly construed issues, I guess, is the way to say it.
Right.
One way.
One of two. My father is deceased, and I need additional information to complete Camp Lejeune claim on behalf of my mother. He was a first lieutenant in 1961, and I know he lived on base. How do I get the details for where he lived and worked? As apparently this has impact on severity of exposure and any monetary decisions. You want his military personnel file, don't you? Because that would show where he was stationed.
Yeah, I think they might be going a little too far with it. If you know he was stationed on Camp Lejeune, then file the claim.
It's always file a claim, right?
Because if you're looking for where he was, you're not probably going to ever find that. Even if you found where his barracks were, I mean, he's going to be all over the base. The
Right.
rule is you just have to be on the base for 30 consecutive days. Doesn't matter where on the base. Okay, so if you know he was stationed at Camp Lejeune, he was there for 30 days or more, then as far as that goes, you're home free, depending on the disability, obviously. File the DIC claim and get moving with it. Yeah, don't you're gonna take it's gonna take you a long time to figure that stuff out when you don't need to.
Right. And if they say no, he wasn't there, then you want to get his military personnel file, which shows every place where he was stationed. What difference, if any, is the process for applying for a TDIU versus a rate increase? That's complicated too. Kerry?
Well, TDIU, you need a 8940, 21-8940, and a rate increase. If you're not doing it on appeal or something, you need a 21-526. That's as far as the mechanics of applying for it. TDIU application, they're probably going to examine anything you list on the TDIU application as being the cause for the unemployability. You don't want to list non-service connected things, but you also don't want to list service connected things. You know, if you got 0% for hearing loss, you know that's not going to contribute to anything. It's just one extra exam that you probably don't need. And a rate increase, you know, they're just going to examine that particular disability and give you a rating for that particular disability. I mean, that's the basics of it. I don't know if you're looking for something more than that.
I know years ago, if you filed for TDIU and listed service-connected problems, they went back and evaluated you for all of those service-connected problems. Now, they may or they may not. And if they do, they're only looking at it in regard to, does this keep you from working? So you may get an increased rating because of their evaluation, or you may not. So it's like Kerry said, if you want TDIU, you file a 8940. And if you want to file for increased rating, then you file a 526. If you have a good nexus and link for something like depression, then why do you see the VA deny it? Is there something that can help get a secondary approved? Thanks. Why does the VA do what they do, Kerry? We see this over and over and over.
The VA.
Every day.
You know, I mean, that's an age-old question. You know,
Yeah.
It could be because they got an opinion that was opposite of your favorable nexus. It could have been somebody looked at it and just didn't know what they were doing, and I don't need to develop this. There's no link here, and just deny it. I mean, it could be any number of reasons. You know, the point is, you got a good nexus, and they deny your claim, appeal it, look at the decision, try to decipher why they denied it. Did they get their own exam and it's negative? We'll get a copy of that exam. But figure out why they denied it, appeal the decision. You got a good nexus, you've got a winnable situation in most cases. So yeah, it's not going to go as you want every time. You may have to fight them, and it's worth it.
It's definitely worth it. I use the argument that the VA is required to look at all and consider all favorable evidence. And so what happens is the VA has this favorable evidence. They send you out for a C&P, which turns out to be unfavorable probably, and use that. So my argument on higher level review is they failed in their duty to assist, to maximize benefits, and to consider all of the favorable evidence in the file. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you have to go to the board. But that's the best argument that I know at the higher level review for that. How about you, Kerry?
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Want to claim sleep apnea as secondary to my service-connected PTSD or rhinitis. I have a VA diagnosis for sleep apnea and use a CPAP. You're going to, based on my experience, which one is more likely to succeed? Do both. When you have an option, when two things may have caused it, use both. Anything that is favorable to you, put that in there. Don't just go with one. If I had hurt my lower back while in the military and documented it in my military medical records 15 years ago, diagnosed with a mild level sleep apnea and CPAP prescribed, what are my chances of getting approved if I file secondary to my asthma with 0% rating? Is the first part about the back? Would you go back one to the first question, Nate? Diagnosed with okay, I'm sorry, I thought it was the back. Mild level sleep apnea, CPAP, what are my chances of getting approved if I file secondary to my asthma with 0% rating? If I had hurt my lower back while in military and documented in all my military records 15 years ago, VA will question the missing chronic complaint during the last 15 years. How much of private medical records, VA medical, do I need to build up for me to file a claim? 6 months to a couple of years? Any insights? Where do you want to start with that, Kerry?
Let's start with the back. The rule is not continuity of treatment. It's continuity of symptoms. I think that's kind of what you're asking about there. If you've got evidence that you hurt your back in your service medical records, that's good. If you got a current diagnosis, that's good. You just need a nexus between the two. VA will come out with negative medical opinions all the time, with their examiner saying there's no evidence of continuity of treatment. That is unlawful. There's no requirement for that. It's continuity of symptoms.
Right.
And you can do that with lay evidence. And that's the best way to do it. Yeah,
By
obviously,
lay evidence, you mean a statement from the veteran and people who knew him before and after service.
right. And I say the best way to do it. Obviously, if you have multiple years of treatment records, that's great. But if you don't, it sounds like you don't. And a lot of people just put up with pain if it's not debilitating for a number of years until it gets debilitating.
Right.
That's just, what a lot of people do. So yeah, build up the lay evidence. Make it, you're competent to state the symptoms that you had throughout the years. So is somebody that knows you, like a spouse, a child, a parent, a friend. Get as many lay statements as you can, and they don't have to be books or nothing. Just you're basically establishing through lay evidence that there's continuity of symptoms.
Right.
That way, if VA comes back and says, "Oh, there's no continuity of treatment," so what? It's not a legal requirement. It's a continuity of symptoms, and that's how you. One way I think you would build a case like that up. If you've got the medical evidence, yeah, then go and get a copy of it if you can.
Right.
But it sounds like you might not, and I'm not sure what that other question was.
I think the other question had to do with if you're 0% for asthma. I think that's what they said. They have, yeah. So go ahead and file for sleep apnea secondary to your asthma. It doesn't matter if it's 0%.
Yeah.
The one thing I want to say about those statements is please don't do statements that say this is a good guy, he really deserves benefits. That doesn't prove your case and it makes you look biased. What you want your witness to say is, I grew up with the veteran. Before he went into the service, he had no problems. We played football, basketball. You're saying things that happen, okay? After service, he couldn't play football with me. He couldn't play basketball. He was always complaining about his back. We go for a walk and he have to stop because of pain. That's the kind of statement you want. You don't want it vague. For instance, after service, right after service is what you want to show. You don't want to show now. So you don't want to say 15 years later, now he has these problems. That doesn't show that it started in service or right after. So remember, it's really important what these people say. And examples about like not being able to play golf or not being able to walk, that's the best thing you can do, other than he didn't, just something that's vague, okay?
Yeah, just the facts, man.
Just the facts. Before we do this, I want to tell you a new thing I'm trying, okay? Every time I have my veterans go in for a CMP exam, it's like the lottery. You never know what you're going to get. So like I will have veterans go in for a headache and they will say, I have to lie down. They will say, I can't think, I can't concentrate, I have to be in a dark room. And then I get this report that shows none of that. So I just started doing a statement on a 4138 from the veteran, and I have him hand it, a written statement, and I have him hand it to the examiner saying, in the past, the CMP exams that I've had have not been accurate, and therefore I want to give you the information in writing so you have confirmation of what I have said to you. And then I would list everything that goes on. And then I turn that in immediately before I get a CMP exam. So I just started this, and the one I got back, it minimized the peripheral neuropathy, but it was very accurate on the voiding. He has to go to the bathroom at least every 45 minutes. Normally, that would be something that I'm thinking they would have made much different. So that's my new thing. If you want to try it, I'm really excited about it, because I think, how is the VA going to say that they're going to have an exam where they say I have to go to the bathroom every 5 hours when the veteran has on a sworn piece of paper said, this is what I've told the examiner, and turned it in the day after the exam. So that's my new thing, Kerry. I don't know if it'll work.
Oh, I like it. I have thought for a long time about, you get a typical complicated case and everything's going to ride on the VA examiner, and that they're probably not going to pay attention to what's really in the file and the arguments you put in the file, and you're afraid by them not doing that it's just going to turn out to be a crap opinion, not based on the real facts. And I've thought plenty of times about, how could I draft something up and put in the file that's pointed to the examiner, okay, and to force them to review it. Now, the reason I haven't done something like that is because when they get those exams, it's the VA employee at the regional office that flags things in the file. And I'm almost guaranteed they're not going to flag the thing that
Yeah,
I'm asking them to just because I'm asking them to do it.
exactly.
You know, but I think there are a lot of times if you could communicate with the examiner, if they're going to be looking for a cause and effect analysis, and you want to explain what benefit of the doubt means to them, so it's simple stuff like that, uh, so that they don't go off the rails and apply a standard too high, right? No, and giving it to them from your client, that's a good idea. So no, I want to hear how it goes.
Particularly on these BVA remands where they're giving 0% or,
Mhm.
and then they send them out. So I'm talking to the client, typing it up, sending it to them, and they're going to present it. So there's that way that person had it and they say, no, I'm going to turn this in as soon as this exam is over. And it says it on there. So
Yeah.
the person will know if they're lying, there's certain things either they did or they didn't have to go to the bathroom every hour. So if they put in things clearly that incorrect, then it's going to question the entire exam.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say that would be another reason to do it is if the doctor, if the nurse or whoever does the exam says something completely opposite of what you
Yep,
give them,
yep,
well, then there's a reason to question it right there.
you're right. Well, that's my new thing. I'll let you know how it's going.
All right.
Okay, next question, Nate. Waiting on migraine secondary to tinnitus decision. I just got a DBQ, that's a disability benefits questionnaire from my personal doctor for migraine secondary to tinnitus in my favor. Not submitted. Should I wait for decision? No. Submit it now. A lot of times, examining doctors, examining nurses, whoever they are, the CMP, if it's a treating physician, they may pay attention to it and they may follow it. Carol, Kerry, and HP team are all awesome. Thank you. When asking a private doctor to fill out a disability benefits questionnaire for migraines that they diagnosed you, what is the best way to ask without making it awkward? Thank you. I just tell them, I need your help, that you're treating me for this, and the VA needs to understand what I'm dealing with. What would you do, Kerry?
No, I think the same thing. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. There's, awkward's probably in the eye of the beholder. If they've been around VA long enough, they've probably experienced, people asking them to fill out a DBQ. Um, I just approach them and ask them next time you're there,
Yeah.
will you consider filling out a DBQ for me? If they don't know what it is, then they might not be soured off of it. In other words, if they've been there long enough, they might have been told by their administration, don't fill those things out, because it used to happen all the time. They're not allowed to fill those out. Yeah, yes, they are. And they absolutely are allowed to fill them out.
That's at the VA. This person has a private doctor, so he's even more likely to get them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I
And
explained that you got to claim with the VA. That's great, Carol.
you need to tell them that this is the form the VA will use in order to decide if you have sleep apnea or whatever migraines. I mean, if you have migraines and how bad they are. And so this is the opportunity. It's pretty much just a check system. Check, 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 and you're finished.
Now,
So,
so I have run into several situations in the past where a private doctor is kind of iffy on making a statement for somebody.
mhm,
They think, because in the private sector, they afraid they might get hauled into court. Uh,
exactly. Have their depositions taken.
yeah, and so in VA that doesn't happen, and
No,
all you private doctors don't know that, right? And so it's important to be prepared to tell them that VA will look at this evidence and either accept it or not, uh, but they cannot question the doctor. They cannot call the doctor in to, and that has been the difference right there in plenty of cases in the past of getting a private doctor to make a statement versus not making one. It's just
right.
realizing that, yeah,
They don't want their time taken up doing depositions. So if you're really clear with them, the VA is never going to contact you. The only thing they're going to do is look at it and accept it or not. So, and also I would offer, say, can I pay you for the extra time to come in and have this form done? So letting, because they're going to look at these pages and think it's going to take forever, but it really doesn't. It takes like 5 minutes on the migraine questionnaire. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I am currently getting looked at prostate problems via the ACE exam. My meds cause erectile dysfunction. Would it be too late to add this new discovery as secondary, or should I wait? I would add it right away. And you can always argue it should have been part of the initial prostate.
Yeah.
Why wait?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. If they do the typical prostate DBQ, it asks if there's erectile dysfunction. It's part of the DBQ. So if they diagnose it and they relate it to the prostate problem and they don't service connect it, I would immediately come back with a request for higher level review and say this was within the scope of the claim. It's right on the examination.
right,
And you should be able to get that. But again, file it like Carol said, nonetheless.
right. How do injuries prior to military service work that are not on military entrance exams? Will we get in trouble for those injuries not being on entrance exams? And then how do we claim them? That's a hard question because, well, what would you say, Kerry?
Well, what you're talking about there, from a legal perspective, is the presumption of soundness or the presumption of aggravation,
Right,
both of which are legally heavy. Uh, um, perfectly doable. No, you're not going to get in trouble. Basically, it's if somebody came to me with a case like that and it was not listed on the exam, on the entrance exam, what the presumption of soundness, I'll try to do this shortly, means is you're in sound condition when accepted and enrolled into service, except as to defects noted on enlistment. So if it's not noted, the presumption sticks that you are in sound condition. It's VA's burden to rebut that presumption. If they rebut the presumption that you were not in sound condition, but it was not listed on your entrance exam, they've got a second prong to rebut of the presumption of soundness, and that's that it was not aggravated by service. Because when it's not on your exam, they have to prove a clear and unmistakable evidence that it existed before service and that it was not aggravated by service. Okay.
exactly.
Now, if you acknowledge, and maybe that's the right thing to do, right? That yes, this did happen before service. Okay, you still get the presumption of soundness because it was not on the enlistment exam. Your statement may very well allow them to rebut, rightfully so, the first prong, but then there's the second prong that presumes the condition was aggravated by the military unless VA can prove otherwise. Okay, so I would not try to hide the fact. Okay, I would say yes, this happened. It's not a man's exam. I get the presumption of soundness. Otherwise, let's just switch it a little bit there and say it was on the entrance exam. Now it becomes a presumption of aggravation, and that works a little bit differently. There's no clear and unmistakable language there. There is if the condition got worse during service, then you get the presumption that that worsening is due to the service, unless there's a specific finding that it was due to natural progress, and the burden's on the government there. If it did not get worse during service, the same thing sort of applies, but the burden's on you there to prove that service got it worse. How do you know if it got worse? Well, you went in with it. There's no treatment for it, okay, while you were in the service. They're going to say, rightfully so, it did not get worse during service, or at the very least, there's no evidence that it did. To kick in the burden being on the VA, that burden's going to fall on you. If it's noted on enlistment and you did get treatment, say it's asymptomatic, right? It's a good example. And then a year, 2 years in the service, you started having to get treatment for it. Now you've shown that it likely got worse during service. Now you can argue, if you do it right, that it's on the burden of VA to prove a specific finding that it was the natural progress of the disease. And if they can't, you should win that claim on aggravation. I said this is legal. It's heavy in the legal
Right.
arguments there, and it's complicated to do it right. And a lot of VA employees are going to get it wrong either way you go. No, you're not going to get in trouble. Be upfront, and if service did truly aggravate it, that is usually a winnable situation.
A lot of people, when they're young, they break their arm, they break their leg, they have problems, and then they're healed. They don't have a problem. They're asymptomatic. And when they go into service, they don't have any problems. Sometimes that's evaluated. Sometimes people don't mention it because they're fine. They don't have a problem. But the two areas where there are certain key words. When you hear those, you realize the VA probably made a mistake, like severance. When I hear that, they probably made a mistake. If reduction, often they've made a mistake in following the law. And this is the other area when they talk about previously, this is a pre-existing condition. Most of the time they get that wrong. So I would go for it. I'm able to work, but I cannot maintain the relationship and rigor of a job after 6 months or so. Psych recommended 50%. I was afraid to say I have suicidal thoughts. What would you recommend? First of all, that you always say that you have, that's a 70% rating. They're not going to lock you up. The only time they lock people up is when they say, and I'm going to go outside and shoot myself, or I'm right now going to go out and shoot somebody else. Other than that, you need to tell them what's going on in your head, that you're hurting yourself. And also that you should be entitled to unemployability, because remember, it's not only can you work, but can you keep a job? And it looks like you can't keep a job. So he would be entitled. What do you think? Any other advice, Kerry?
I agree 100%. You got to be able to obtain and maintain gainful employment. If you can't maintain it, that's words have meaning in the law. Then you can't maintain it, and you're not employable. At the same time, yeah, do not hold back any symptoms during your exams. That will get you every time. Um, and I would go one step. If you do plan on going out and doing something, I tell them, even regardless of what they do, because one, you shouldn't do that, and two, you need to get, you know, you've got to,
Help.
you got to, yeah, you got, if you're having those kind of thoughts, if your anxiety is to the point where it's telling you would be better off if you just weren't here, that's a serious mental health symptom there. Um, and one way to take that some burden off of you, and I'm just speaking as a disabled vet myself, um, get your claim right, because if you're going through all that stuff and you're trying to figure out how to keep food on your table, um, that just adds to that stress. The right level of compensation can go. I know money doesn't buy happiness, but it can reduce a little stress.
It
Uh,
really can. Kerry, I've
and
had so many veterans say, having this allows me to stop worrying about this process, and I can relax and take care of my medical problems. I know that my family is taken care of. I know that I am not going to be kicked out of my house, and I have food to eat. It resolves so many problems, and that's why being honest about what's going on is so important with the VA. If I had to say there's one thing that veterans fail to do, is to tell the VA about suicidal thoughts. Please don't not do that. It's part of your claim. It's a big part of your claim.
yeah,
Intent to file for unemployability. Have open claims. Should I file unemployability now or wait for the claims decision? File now. Always file now. Claims may give me 100%. IU plus claims may give me SMCS. Strategy, file now. I have heard so many people saying, I had a great CMP exam, or the judge is really great, and I'm sure I'm going to win, and they don't win. Okay?
yeah.
File your claims now. Don't get in a fight about the onset date.
And if that TDIU claim is pending during the pendency of your other claims, it's 6.5 of one, dozen of the other, half dozen of the other, I think. But it may make it easier for VA to understand that this TDIU claim was pending, not just within a year of the decision for TDIU purposes, but during the pendency
Right.
of the claim that brought you in that range. It gives you a little bit more argument there for them to do the right effective date for TDIU, I think.
Exactly. I was given 30% disability for ulcerative colitis in 1967. Recently upgraded to 60%. I was forced to retire early in 1996 due to this illness. I have not worked full time since then. Am I eligible to claim unemployability? Yes. Can it be retroactive 1996? I think that's going to be really hard. I mean, you may have something that's open that you can reopen the 30% rating or that claim, but probably not. That's one of the things that you would have to find clear and unmistakable error or an open claim all the way back.
Okay.
I am SMC L&a. My caregiver and I applied with my local VA hospital for it. I just got the official designation of catastrophically disabled veteran. I need lots of help, 3+ activities of daily living, and without my caregiver, I would need to be in a nursing home. How do we best use this new designation to get SMC TBI and level 2 of program of comprehensive assistance for family caregivers? Kerry?
Oh God, that is
Let me go back. So it's hard to see what you have now for what you have to file, right?
yeah. Without, I mean, I think that's literally a case I would have to see.
Right.
Because you're talking SMC for TBI. I mean, you're already getting SMC on a half. So are you referring to SMCT, which is paid at the R2 rate? You know, that's a big difference from L and a half. And I'm not
Right.
sure if that's what the question's asking or not. The level 2 caregiver stuff. I mean, it's a need to know more about what's going on
Yeah, I think
medically.
we need a lot more information, unfortunately.
Yeah, because once you start getting into, above the L and a half range, SMC, you're getting into some complicated SMC. And it depends on how you got to that SMC. For example, you could have gotten there through, say, mental health purposes, being in the need of aid and attendance based on mental health, and maybe you have a different disability rated at 50%. That would get you L and a half, but that by itself will not get you SMCT, in the vast majority of circumstances. Um, now it could be due to loss of both legs, and that would get you the L, and then so there's so many scenarios there.
Right.
To say how you could get, one, do you have a TBI? Because you're just asking about SMC for TBI. Do you have
Is
a
it
TBI?
service connected?
Yeah.
Is the TBI service connected? I mean, there's so many. I'm sorry. This is a great case, but
Yeah.
we need to know more facts. And I can tell you, SMCT. How many? What do you think? It's like 0.01% of people who get it. They are really, really tough on.
Oh yeah. There's a very small handful of people in the country that know SMC very well, and that I'm including VA employees in that. There are some
Yes.
that think they know, but there are very few that truly know. They're out there, but they're a little long in the tooth, and they probably won't be with VA much longer.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of attorneys and BSOs and everybody that just doesn't get SMC.
Well, thank you, Kerry. It's always fun to be with you. I hope you have fun with your gun, and don't forget to invite me to the range when it's open. Okay.
Well, I have to get a break from work first.
Okay. All right.
Work comes first. Once I have time, I'll go see how it shoots out at longer ranges.
All right. Everybody have a great.
There's a 1,000-yard range like 2 hours from here, but that's so I gotta have some spare time to get over there and dry it out.
All right. Have a good week. Win your claims.